But like I say, just because a kid is using object symbols today or photographs today doesn't mean that that's what they'll use forever, right? So when we're also doing a symbol assessment, we want to be thinking about what's the next most likely kind of symbol that might be appropriate for this student. So he understands photographs today. Is text going to be the next thing? Picture communication symbol is going to be the next thing? Like, what's going to be the next most appropriate thing? Because then I'll be teaching towards that. Anytime that I'm working with a kid who's using object cues, I'm thinking about, okay, what are we going to work on teaching him to use instead of object cues? What will replace object cues if we can get him understanding something two-dimensional? Are we going to use photographs? Are we going to use picture communication symbols? What are we going to use, okay? Now it sounds like, and it often seems like, the logical order is objects, then photos, photos, then graphic symbols then text. But I had a kid, he came into kindergarten, and he arrived with a photo book. He'd been at a preschool program. In his preschool program, they'd heard about kids with autism having books of photos, and you show the kid with autism the photo, they know what they're supposed to do, and all is rosy. So when he came to kindergarten, he came with this book of photos. And I remember standing in the hallway at school one day, watching his aide try to kindly, she wasn't doing this in a mean way at all, but trying to sort of drag him, he's on the floor kicking and screaming, to the playground because it's recess time. And he loved the playground. This is not, he didn't want to go to the playground. And she's got the photo out and she's pointing to the photo and she's signing play. And he doesn't understand sign, but she's pointing to the photo, come on, come on. And he's kicking and he's spitting and he's creating a big fuss. And I just watched this, right? And I watched her kind of like move him along until finally she got him to the doorway where the playground could be seen. And when he got to the doorway and she kind of propped him and turned him so that he could see out the window, he was out that door like a shot. He did not understand the photograph at all. Meant nothing to him, right? He had a lovely book full of them, but they meant absolutely nothing, right? And so people were doing an awful lot of showing him photographs. He'd kick and spit and fall on the floor. They'd pick him up and take him where he was going, and then once he got where he was usually happy about it, right? But the photos aren't working, people. And I went in and did a symbol assessment. He understood nothing two-dimensional. Not photographs, not picture communication symbols, nada. He did understand object cues. When I was testing though, it was really clear photographs were not gonna work. It was almost like he got lost in the photo. Too much color, too much information, too much stuff. Even good photos that didn't have, it only had the marble run. It didn't have 12 other toys in the background. He still got lost in the pieces, which is kind of a common autism thing, that you kind of see the tree and not the forest. So then I looked at picture communication symbols and I gave him a color picture communication symbol and he couldn't seem to do well with that either. But on occasion, if it was a highly familiar item, something that he knew really well, he could match a three-dimensional object to a black and white picture communication symbol, no color. So his next step, we started with objects. The next step was black and white line drawings, no photographs, right? Which seems illogical, right? You think that it must be this progression from object, then photo, then symbol, then text, and oftentimes it is, but not always, right? So I've had kids never use photographs at all because photographs just seem to be too much, which frankly I'm just as happy about because I can produce symbols faster and easier than I can photos anyway, so I'm usually happy about that. But that's what we did, and so he went from objects to black and white line drawings, and then eventually he could use pretty much anything, including text, right? He developed some degree of reading skills, and so there were some words that he knew that we could also use to convey things on the spot. But we were to the point where I could, quick draw McGraw on a whiteboard if I didn't have a symbol, and he could understand that. But he had to learn that over time, right? But that's about really understanding your individual, thinking about where are we at today, where are we gonna go tomorrow? So here's an example, this is a schedule. It's got objects here, but it also has black and white picture communication symbols. And the instructor is pairing those things so that the student, when the student sees, this is old, obviously, this is a cassette tape. Some of you in the room have no idea what this is. Every year at CAP, I get younger and younger students, and every year I make some sort of reference to something that they no longer know what it is. And this year, cassette tapes. A whole room full of people. I don't think one of them in the room knew what a cassette tape was. This is a cassette tape. It used to play music. But they've paired it with the picture communication symbol for tape. The idea being that over time, when the individual sees the symbol paired with the object, that they will learn what the symbol represents, and you can start to fade out the object cue. Because like I said, it is a bit of a bother to have to carry around three-dimensional objects with you everywhere, right? But if that's all the person understands, you're going to carry objects with you everywhere. And we have done it and we can do it, and it's not the most convenient, but if that's what we need to do, that's kind of what we should be doing if we want individuals to understand what's going on and not dropping to the floor in the grocery store parking lot, for example, okay? A few other things to consider when you're thinking about choosing your representations. One is visual acuity. Does this child have any vision issues? We might need to use larger symbols if we've got somebody who has vision problems. We might be able to use smaller symbols, which means you get more symbols per area, right? You can say more with less, if the person's got really good eyesight. But visual acuity is always important. Fine motor skills, very important. So if we're talking about somebody placing symbols in a schedule and removing symbols independently in their schedule, and they've got really poor fine motor skills and the symbols are teeny tiny 1 inch, they're going to have problems. Do we have to have larger symbols so that from a motor standpoint, they can manipulate them? Or instead of just laminating the symbol and putting Velcro on it, do we need to mount the symbols on some thick core foam board so that it's easier for them to pick up and manipulate? Those are things we need to think about. If we're working with someone who has an actual visual impairment, sometimes what we need to do is what's happened with this symbol up here, we have to flip the background and the foreground. Many people with visual impairments can see things better when they have some usable vision if the background is dark and the lines are either white or yellow, right? So that might be something. Individuals with visual impairments might need tactile input as well, right? So all of those are things that you need to think about, and you should consult with appropriate professionals. So if you're working with someone with a visual impairment, you should be working with the vision specialist who knows about stuff like background, foreground. That's how I learned about that, is from a colleague who works with deafblind kids, right? Because there are things that we might not know that we need to consider, right? And other people in other fields might have some really valuable input and also some really useful ideas and strategies about how we can make this work better for kids who have some particular needs.